This is Heliox, where evidence meets empathy. Independent, moderated, timely, deep, gentle, clinical, global, and community conversations about things that matter. Breathe easy, we go deep and lightly surface the big ideas.
If you follow the world of science and policy, we've sort of reached this moment where our ethical ambitions are finally beating our technological capabilities.
Right.
For years, the move away from animal testing has been framed mainly as an ethical thing. But what happens when the alternatives aren't just, kinder, but actually scientifically better? Today, we are doing a deep dive into exactly that shift. Our focus is a comprehensive UK roadmap announced in November 2025, which aims to aggressively accelerate the phasing out of animal testing.
And this isn't just a vague promise?
No, not at all. Our mission is to unpack the three big features of this plan. The specific cutting-edge technologies that make this possible, the really robust, measurable timelines that give it teeth, and the huge new investment, a whopping $75 million total, that's driving this whole effort.
And I think it's crucial to see this not just as a regulatory change, but as a scientific mandate. What the sources are showing is this widespread consensus that, well, often traditional animal models just aren't the best predictors for what will happen in humans. The real goal here is to find testing methods that are fundamentally more human relevant.
So safer and more effective medicines at the end of the day.
Exactly. And this is critical for everything from new vaccines to, say, ensuring the safety of chemical exposure like pesticides. And to your point about coordination, the strategy was developed collaboratively, a real partnership between government, life sciences, business, and, importantly, animal welfare organizations.
Okay, let's jump straight into the engine room then,
Yeah.
the technology. Because this is what's enabling this whole rapid transition.
It really is.
For decades, researchers relied on these standard but sometimes, misleading safety tests. Now we're seeing breakthroughs that are just fundamentally changing how we determine the impact of chemicals on us. The roadmap points to three major technological alternatives. Let's start with the one that sounds the most futuristic, organ-on-a-chip systems.
These are just revolutionary. They're tiny, microengineered devices, often smaller than a...
Smaller than a credit card, I read.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Smaller than a credit card. And they're lined with real human cells. By running fluids through them, they can mimic the function of a human organ, a lung, a kidney, you name it.
So what's the main scientific advantage there over, say, a traditional animal test?
It's all about specificity and relevance. When you test a compound on, say, a mouse, you're dealing with a mouse's physiology, its metabolism, things that don't always translate perfectly to humans.
Right.
Organ-on-a-chip systems, because they use human cells and mimic the microenvironment of human organs, they give you results that are immediately relevant to patient safety. You're testing a drug on a human liver model before it ever goes near a person.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah.
And then following that logic, the strategy leans heavily into 3D bioprinted tissues. We're not just talking about simple cells in a petri dish anymore.
Absolutely not. No, this is sophisticated engineering. 3D bioprinting lets researchers create complex, multi-layered human tissue samples, think realistic skin models for irritation tests, or fully structured liver tissues that actually work for weeks.
Wow.
This provides a lifelike three-dimensional environment that, a flat two-dimensional culture just can't replicate. And that structure is essential because toxicity and drug absorption, they happen in a complex matrix, not a flat layer.
And the third major pivot is pure computational power, artificial intelligence. This is the machine learning part of it, right?
Precisely. AI is being used to analyze just staggering amounts of existing data, molecular information, biological data, historical test results. The idea is to train algorithms to accurately predict the safety of new medicines in silico entirely in a computer simulation.
So if a new drug has a certain molecular structure, the AI can look at millions of similar ones and predict its toxicity without a single physical test being run.
That's the core idea. It's pattern recognition on a massive, previously unimaginable scale. The sources see this as a way to just massively speed up the preclinical stage, filtering out bad candidates early on.
And to make this all real, the money's already flowing. We saw that $15.9 million commitment from major players like the Medical Research Council, Innovate UK, and the Wellcome Trust just for these human in vitro models.
And that funding is hyper-targeted. It's not just a blank check. It's supporting 5 specialized UK teams focusing on the models we really need: liver, brain, complex cancers, pain, and blood vessel diseases. It shows they're tackling the hardest parts first.
Okay, here's where the strategy moves from that tech vision to concrete reality, because this isn't just a vague hope. This is one of the most detailed roadmaps of its kind in the world, with incredibly specific targets. Let's unpack these deadlines.
Yeah, this part is fascinating.
The first major one hits really quickly. By the end of 2026, the UK aims to end regulatory testing on animals for assessing skin and eye irritation and skin sensitization. That's, what, just over a year from now?
That is an incredibly aggressive timeline, isn't it? And it directly depends on the rapid validation of those 3D bioprinted skin and eye models we just talked about.
But is that actually realistic? I mean, what happens if the UK CV ban, which we'll get to, doesn't validate the alternatives in time?
Well, the intention here is clearly to pull the future forward. The deadlines are robust, but the expectation is that the new infrastructure will just drastically speed up that validation process. The sources imply the UK is committed to finding a way to meet the deadline, not just extend it.
I see.
Then moving into 2027, you have two very specific commitments. The first is ending tests for the potency of Botox on mice.
Why is Botox testing so specific? Why is that a target?
It's a classic example of a challenge test.
Yeah.
The traditional method involves injecting mice and observing the outcome. It uses a lot of animals for one type of product. The alternatives, these cell-based assays, are now mature enough to take over. It's a huge landmark. The second 2027 commitment is mandating DNA-based lab methods for adventitious agent testing, basically, detecting any viral or bacterial contamination in medicines.
And then looking further out to 2030, the focus shifts to reducing pharmacokinetic studies. That's tracking how a drug moves through the body, specifically on dogs and non-human primates.
Right, and this target really hits the heart of the complexity argument. Pharmacokinetics involves tracking a drug's absorption, distribution, metabolism, and excretion, the whole ADME process.
Which requires a whole interconnected system to study properly.
Exactly. That's why whole animals, particularly dogs and primates, are currently essential for these later stage tests.
So the 2030 target suggests that the multi-organ-on-a-chip systems, where you might connect a printed liver to a printed kidney, are expected to be mature enough in the next few years to start replacing a big chunk of that animal use.
That's the signal, yeah. But notice the wording. It's a reduction by 2030, not a full elimination. It recognizes the complexity, but still puts huge pressure on the tech developers to deliver.
Now, none of this ambitious timeline is possible without some serious financial and structural support. This brings us back to that total £75 million funding package. The vast majority of that $60 million is for building infrastructure. I want to focus on this because it addresses that classic regulatory bottleneck that has stifled alternative methods for years, even when the science was ready.
Oh, absolutely. That bottleneck is the key operational issue. Historically, you could develop a brilliant non-animal test, but getting it formally approved by regulators could take years of slow bureaucratic work. It just kills innovation.
So how does this new plan cut through that?
Well, the $60 million is for two key new structures. The first is a preclinical translational models hub. Think of it as a national institute bringing together data, tech, and expertise to get researchers collaborating properly.
So if a team in Edinburgh makes a breakthrough on a lung on a chip, this hub makes sure that expertise and data are immediately available to colleagues in London or Manchester.
Precisely. It turns isolated research into a coordinated national effort. And the second, highly critical piece, is the new UK Centre for the Validation of Alternative Methods, or UKCVM.
The UKCVM. That sounds like the single most important administrative body in this whole roadmap.
It is. Its mission is explicit: to dramatically speed up regulatory approval. It's the trusted clearinghouse that validates these new methods and then streamlines their acceptance. If UKCVM works, those 2026 and 2027 deadlines suddenly look a lot more achievable.
And beyond the centers themselves, the strategy is also focused on the people, on the researchers. Starting next year, there's a focus on foundational training in alternative methods for early career researchers. That's a huge structural change.
It's about securing the next generation. If PhD students are learning these non-animal models as standard practice, it completely changes the culture of research within a decade.
And it's worth noting, this isn't all being built from zero, is it? The sources point out it leverages the success of the pre-existing National Center for the Replacement, Refinement, and Reduction of Animals in Research, the NC3Rs.
That's vital context. The NC3Rs has successfully championed the 3Rs for years. This new strategy is basically building on that foundation and, well, putting it on steroids with massive funding and direct regulatory power. It's a clear signal to move past just reduction and towards outright replacement.
So we have this aggressive roadmap, we have the funding, we have this incredible technology. On one hand, the strategy has been welcomed as tremendous news by organizations like the RSPCA,
Of course.
but we have to examine the more nuanced reaction from the life sciences sector itself.
And that balanced view is absolutely essential here. Major industry groups, the ADPI, medical research charities, the Francis Crick Institute, they all agree there's huge momentum to embrace ethical, high-quality science. They want to lead this.
But there's a big note of caution in their response.
Yes. Their primary concern, their bottom line, is patient safety. They emphasize that while they are fully committed to the 3 Rs, the science does not yet exist to fully eliminate animal use in all research areas.
They're worried about moving too quickly.
Exactly. They caution that if you move too fast in areas where alternatives aren't robustly validated, you could inadvertently compromise the safety of future medicines. They say animals remain necessary where no validated alternatives exist, particularly for studying complex systemic diseases like Alzheimer's.
Right, going back to that ADME discussion, you still need the whole living organism to see how a drug behaves systemically, how it interacts with the immune system, the nervous system.
Precisely. Modeling those complex interactions between organs is currently the scientific bottleneck. Industry leaders stress that prematurely eliminating that option before the alternatives are proven ready could actively hinder medical advances for patients who desperately need them.
Which highlights the delicate balancing act this whole roadmap has to perform. And it's important to reiterate the existing legal guardrail in the UK, isn't it? Animals already cannot be used if there is a working, validated, non-animal way of answering the question.
That is the framework this entire strategy operates in.
Right.
It isn't banning animal use outright. It's aggressively funding and streamlining the pathway to bring those alternatives forward as soon as it is safe and effective to do so. It's about shrinking the area where animal use is a necessity.
So what does this all mean for the future of biomedical science? The core takeaway for me is that this is a massive, coordinated national effort. It's linking the growth of the UK's life sciences sector with its commitment to ethical treatment, positioning the UK as a proactive global leader.
And if we look at the bigger picture, I think you should consider the pressure cooker environment this all creates. The strategy mentions that the Animals and Science Committee welcomes restarting the survey on public attitudes to animal research.
Oh, okay.
So when you combine that heightened public expectation with strict published regulatory deadlines like 2026 and this flood of technological innovation like organ-on-a-chip systems, it just dramatically accelerates the pace of innovation worldwide.
So it creates a positive feedback loop.
It does. It's a complex engineering task, marrying huge scientific challenges with clear ethical goals. For those of you tracking global policy shifts, the speed at which the UK Centre for the Validation of Alternative Methods, the UK CVM, manages to cut through that regulatory red tape, that will be the single best metric for determining the success and replicability of this roadmap internationally. Keep an eye on the UK CVM.
Thanks for listening today. 4 recurring narratives underlie every episode: boundary dissolution, adaptive complexity, embodied knowledge, and quantum-like uncertainty. These aren't just philosophical musings, but frameworks for understanding our modern world. We hope you continue exploring our other podcasts, responding to the content, and checking out our related articles at helioxpodcast.substack.com.